Do you miss the likes of Eat Carpet? Do you wish you could see more experimental things at the cinema than just the latest superhero movie? This weekend, there are 2 nights of a thing called the Sam Hyde Film Festival on offer. Mike Retter has just joined me in the studio. He's one of the organisers. G'day, Mike.
G'day, Jason.
Now, first of all, I noticed, are you drinking coffee right now?
Hot chocolate.
Oh, hot chocolate. Okay. You came in with a coffee cup and sipping it, and I was like, you're a madman. So, you're Mike Retter. You're not Sam Hyde. Who's Sam Hyde?
Sam Hyde is an American artist. He's basically a YouTuber, a controversial YouTuber that I think is the most important artist working today. I think he's the Andy Warhol of this generation.
Okay. And so, controversial, what do you mean by that?
Well, a lot of the controversy isn't him, but is the swirling culture around him. So every time this is quite dark, but every time there is a mass shooting in the United States, people report to the media and the police that it was him, and they send a photo of him in. And so like the news will often show his face. It's a very dark prank.
So this is not him doing it, but this is just, it's become a thing.
It's become a thing.
Right.
I mean, the FBI have even come to interview him about this, but he said, look, it's not me. I don't want this. But he's actually a very interesting avant-garde artist working in a variety of different film forms on YouTube. And I think that cinema has kind of become boring. And apart from big Marvel films, people aren't really going. They're actually watching YouTube. And I think it's time that we start looking at it seriously as art. And some of it is art. It's very textured and layered and kind of like non-narrative stuff that we used to watch on Eat Carpet and things like that. So I think it's time that we put that in the cinema and start taking it seriously.
Okay, so is this a retrospective of his work to date?
Yeah, it'll be a bit of a career overview from the very beginning to some very recent stuff. But it's not just about him. We'll be showing work from his collaborators, acolytes, local work like Raka Raka. And yes, stuff that is made for online, basically. Yeah. And the thing is, the most successful filmmakers in Adelaide right now are YouTubers.
Yeah.
Raka Raka. And I think it's important that we see the fresh air and life that YouTubers are sort of bringing to the cinema.
Yeah. So Raka Raka directed the movie Talk to Me, which is gone gangbusters all around the world, and it was a darling at Sundance and did amazingly work. They're now about to direct, I think, is it the next Street Fighter movie?
Right.
Yeah. And they're twins who used to make wrestling videos in their backyard and throw each other through tables and cause a whole bunch of panic at shopping centres when they would dress up as a whole bunch of characters, and they've just taken the world by storm, haven't they?
Wildly successful, but they also built their career on controversy as well. You know, with some of the stunts that they've done, like the underwater car and things like that. Yes. So, you know, and it kind of reminds me of Orson Welles. Like Orson Welles changed cinema, but he would not have made Citizen Kane if he didn't do that War of the Worlds fake broadcast in 1938, which made, you know, a lot of Americans think there was an alien invasion because it was presented like a news program. Although he nearly got in trouble for that, I mean, it ended up giving him an opportunity to make a full-length movie at a studio with complete creative freedom. And that led to Citizen Kane, which is like a wildly innovative film. So I think that cinema is a bit stale, not just in terms of content, but also aesthetically. I think that when the film era ended and we started making movies digitally, there is no texture there. And so sometimes I think we enjoy the texture in the low budget video, in the lo-fi video, in the video that a teenager has made with their phone or an even worse kind of camera. I think it brings us back to the grain that we see in 16 millimeter. And, you know, texture, you know, gives something to an image. And now everything is incredibly glossy. It's 4K, but it's like I can't see anything. It's just too smooth. Aesthetically, this festival offers a lot of texture. And all the filmmakers are working with sort of different styles and color palettes. So, yeah. Okay,
so if it's Sam's work in his career and people he's collaborated with, do you put it in context over the 2 days? Like, are there people explaining, oh, well, this is what he did here, or are you just kind of playing it chronologically? Are there notes that people can look at throughout the course to see kind of how it all fits together?
Well, there are 2 nights of the festival,
Yeah.
and both nights do involve a documentary of sorts.
Okay.
That involve Hyde. And one will be a bit of a career overview. The other is a sort of dialogue he had with the other YouTuber, iDubbbz. iDubbbz is a massive YouTuber that was making a documentary about Hyde, but then he kind of didn't want to release it. And so Hyde said, okay, well, I was filming at the same time. I'll release my own. And that that caused a bit of attention. And then iDubbbz had to hastily finish his own as a kind of rebuttal. It was a really interesting dialogue. And I think that is, you know, in those sort of academic cinephile circles, they need to start taking this stuff seriously, because this is the kind of Jean-Luc Godard of our day that we should be talking about. We shouldn't just be talking about experimental film from the 60s and the 70s. Let's talk about the present.
And so this is content that's made for phones or laptop screens and stuff like that. Have you seen it on the big screen yet?
No.
Okay, so you'll experience it with everyone else.
Yeah.
What do you think how do you think it'll change?
I think it'll look epic. Things that are made for the small screen have to pop, you know. And when you see things on the big screen, you see all that sort of detail. So I have thought about it. I think it'll be mental. I think it'll be great. I don't think it will not work. I think it will definitely work. And the only reason I haven't seen it on a big screen is nobody puts it on a big screen. And I think it's time we start doing that.
So you've organised this festival. It's not just you though, is it?
Yeah, it's a small group of people.
Yeah. The Cinematic Cultural Research Unit, is that
Yes.
you? Okay. And you're essentially a film club at Adelaide Uni?
We're not associated with the university, but we do operate out of there. We do have access to a little bit of facility there. And so it's people that go to the university, but also some people that don't. And we're pretty low key. And this is really our first time where we're emerging. Yeah.
And so what does the CCRU do? Like what's your major interests and motivations?
Well, we're all obsessed with cinema, like lovers of cinema, from the very beginning, the silent era, to the present. And we have, rigorous debate about what we like, what we think is good. Most of us are filmmakers. We want to make film, but we also want to research, and we want to, make films as research and research cinema to complement our own filmmaking, and I guess be as obsessive as possible. I think because we look at the great artists and they were all obsessive and unhealthy. They weren't stable people necessarily with good grades. A lot of them were dropouts. And if you look at Werner Herzog, I mean, to make it Aguirre, The Wrath of God, he stole his cameras from the film school. So we do embrace rule breaking and different approaches and attitudes. Yeah.
So let's talk a bit about experimental film. We don't get a chance to see it. Like Eat Carpet hasn't been on TV for 10, 15 years now. So what makes something experimental?
How long was a piece of string? Many different things to make it experimental. I mean, you can have a conventional narrative film that is just shot in a weird way, or is playing with narrative in a different way, or you're dropping narrative entirely. I still think narrative structure is important. I do believe in a start, middle, and end at the bare minimum. And if you look at a lot of experimental film, it does kind of have that. So if you look at 2001: A Space Odyssey, I think that's the archetypal experimental film, because it's really that Stargate sequence in the third act. Like, it's the third act kind of disorientation is a common trope in experimental film. It helps if you haven't studied film and you just go and make it intuitively. We have Molly Hewson, who's made it work. It's very intuitive. I think they've just shot it on their phone. It's really good, really melancholic. I think there is a kind of narrative structure in there, but there's not a traditional narrative.
I mean, the things you've mentioned that makes something experimental is often the absence of something. It's the absence of a narrative or something. Is there something that an experimental film does have that a mainstream film doesn't? Are there any things like that?
I'm most fond of experimentation in terms of aesthetic. So the way the film looks. We talked earlier about the grain structure of film. There's so much experimentation you can do with film alone. And it's almost like all cinema was experimental to a point when you're shooting on film, because you don't know how it's going to turn out when you're developing the film in a tub. It could come out bad, and it's just such a mystery. So it feels like an experiment, and I think that's lost today because we're not shooting on film. So that's one thing we definitely, as a group, are wanting to transition to, is to shoot stuff on celluloid. But just aesthetic choices. I think that's, for me, the key to experimental film. Not so much like, crazy narrative that's, doesn't make sense. I like aesthetic. I like aesthetic to wash over me and to be an experience, even in a conventional narrative.
Are there any mainstream films that give you that aesthetic that you're after?
Oh, absolutely. And I love mainstream cinema when it's at its best. I just probably...
Oh, but just in terms of like the stuff that you like that ticks both boxes, I guess, for you.
Absolutely. I'd say the original Top Gun is both a very commercial film, but also a very avant-garde film. A lot of the directors that came from the UK advertising industry injected new life into cinema because they were so conscious of lenses and technology, because they were shooting very small commercials with a lot of money to sell products, and it needed to look perfect. Well, they brought that and basically brought film noir to the modern era, like a sort of coloured film noir. Another would be, say, Rocky IV. I think Rocky IV is sort of like an 80s masterpiece. 30% of the film is montage. So it really goes back to the early experimental Russian Soviet montage work, Eisenstein. Commercial films, mainstream blockbusters absolutely can be experimental. In fact, that's my favorite thing.
And often in context, they were quite experimental at the time, but then people have copied them and it's become things that people recognize now.
Yeah.
And when you see an experimental film, do you, as someone who has a fair bit of experience with it, do you always get it? Sometimes get it? You know, what I guess percentage of the time do you feel like you walk away with an understanding of what the filmmaker was trying to do?
Frankly, sometimes there isn't anything to get.
So that makes me feel a lot better.
I'm not always a fan of all experimental film. I mean, the stuff we're actually concentrating on is really popular stuff on YouTube that I think is experimental. I think that, you know, in the experimental, you know, scene where, you know, people are wearing a beret and going to university, often that stuff, you know, it is a wank. Like there isn't much in there. It is pretentious, and I don't think there really is much to get. There's a lot of what we call slow cinema, where it's just people sitting around and not much happening. And what they're trying to do is ape filmmakers like Tarkovsky, who were using a slow pace for a reason, with, you know, a really intense mise-en-scène, you know, coordination of what's in the frame, figures moving in the frame, like it being sort of perfect. People are taking that kind of idea and just basically putting nothing happening. And it's almost like an insult to the audience, and it's like, oh, if you don't get it, you're an idiot. And there's like, no, maybe you're the idiot. What I want to do is expose those that are into experimental film, that are cinephiles, to a lot of this contemporary YouTube and online stuff, because I think it is experimental, but it hasn't quite made its way into the world of academia, and that's part of the goal of these screenings.
Nice. So you've made some other film festivals. Is it with the club as well, or on your own?
I'm also part of the Port Film Co-op.
Okay.
So we've made vertical film festivals before.
Right.
One of them was part of the Adelaide Film Festival. We've made our own vertical feature as well. Made documentaries, podcasts. We've made our own magazines. And we're deeply involved in film culture. Yeah.
So there might be some things out there that people have seen, come across randomly and enjoyed, and this is like a continuation of them.
Hopefully, you know, some people that previously gone to the 916 Film Festival or seen our film Youth on the March will come along to this, yeah. And the event is free as well. So it's on at 6:30 Friday night and Saturday night coming up at the Palace Nova. So just come along. It's free. Palace Nova East End, 6:30 Friday and Saturday. And it'll be a good chance for people to meet other filmmakers and cross-pollinate.
I love it. And so how long, like total runtime over the 2 days, how much content have you amassed for this?
The first screening is around 2 hours.
Right.
So we've got like a documentary. We've got a fake TED Talk that Sam Hyde did. We have a half-hour short film that he did that's called Smokane 3, which is fantastic. And then a whole bunch of shorts by different people, even memes as well. That's the other thing. I think that a lot of meme videos are incredibly avant-garde. I mean, they are the current avant-garde as far as I'm concerned. But the funny thing is, a lot of the people that make this stuff are so removed from cinema, they don't even think they're filmmakers. They just think they're content makers, but they're making great work. So we're showing it.
Great.
And so, yeah, it's a bit of a compile of material. And then the second night is even longer, and we'll actually have some awards. We're going to award some of the filmmakers.
Oh, great. Lovely. Well, that's fantastic. So it's the Sam Hyde Film Festival, 6:30, Friday and Saturday at the Palace Nova East End in Rundle Street. Mike, best of luck with it. I hope it goes great.
Thanks a lot.